Tolu, hi. Why is climate adaptation so important for Africa and African cities?
In Africa, we are feeling the impacts of climate change today, whether that's flooding across Nigeria in places like Lagos or droughts in places like Kenya. We are feeling the impacts today. And when we talk about climate, we often talk about mitigation and trying to get to net zero, and that's very important. But when we think about the impacts that we're feeling in Africa today, and you compare and contrast that with the contribution of Africa to emissions, we need to sort of adapt right now, and we need to focus on adaptation and resilience to save and preserve lives and livelihoods. And for these, in fact, we need to focus even more on cities, because with increasing urbanization, cities is where we have the bulk of people today, and we expect to have even more people over time. So we need to focus on building resilience in Africa, in African cities today.
So how do African cities do that? How do they adapt? How do they build resilience?
One of the challenges we all need to grapple with is the fact that we live in a world of finite resources. And nowhere is that more evident than in Africa, where we need to develop, where we need to develop and build human capital with limited resources. And so I think the first thing we must do is ensure that we have a deep understanding of the risks that apply to us on a local level, because we need to tailor our solutions to those risks. So the first thing we must do is build understanding of the risks. With a deep understanding of the risk, we need to build a clear portfolio of projects that are tailored to that risk. And then we need to galvanize stakeholders to drive financing towards those projects. We see in our work three types of projects that we need in Africa. I think one is we need to build resilient infrastructure. You have coastal cities that have their power lines on the coast, but are going to experience sea level rise. You have buildings that are not appropriately weatherized. The first thing we must do is build resilient infrastructure. In addition to building resilient infrastructure, we need to build resilient communities. There are individuals that are going to experience seawall and flooding right now that we need to consider relocating. We need to ensure that people have insurance to absorb the shocks of these climate impacts. And as government and as city planners and country planners, we need to also improve our ability to assess the risks, anticipate the risk, and respond when these climate impacts realize and arrive.
Finally, what are you hopeful for out of COP27 in terms of adaptation and resilience for Africa?
We've begun to have the conversations about adaptation, which is quite exciting. And this is the Action COP. And at this event, we talked a lot about financing and innovating around finance to address adaptation. Financing to support a lot of these projects that have now been identified. In a place like Lagos, for example, we estimate that Lagos will need over $8 billion to build resilience against climate change. And so what I'm hopeful for is that because the conversations are now happening, we need to match the right stakeholders, the funders with these projects, such that the implementation actually begins, such that we begin to see the adaptation implementation occurring next year. Not 2 years, not 5 years, not 10 years, but next year. So hopeful that in 2023, we begin to see some projects being implemented to drive adaptation and resilience across the continent.
Tolu, thanks so much.